I would now like to introduce today's speaker, Paula White, who is the Executive Director of JerseyCAN. Paula has a distinguished career in education, including founding and leading a charter school, and has served as the New Jersey Department of Education's Chief Turnaround Officer. Paula now leads JerseyCAN, a nonprofit organization started in 2013, focusing on ensuring that all New Jersey students graduate high school both ready for college and career success. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paula to share, to teach us about the importance of literacy.
Thank you so much, Elena. And before I go any further, I just want to thank you all for extending this invitation for me to be a part of your organization's Lunch and Learn. Ever since I've been in New Jersey in various capacities, ACNJ has done such important work advocating for children, for their rights, whether it's special education, making sure that children are fed, early childhood education. And so I'm so appreciative of the work that you all have led, and I'm just humbled to have an opportunity to share with you. So thank you so much. So I'm hoping that we can spend our time this afternoon for a few minutes before we get into any potential conversation or Q&A, is just to sort of establish this notion of leveraging literacy as a New Jersey imperative. And so I want to kind of walk you through a little bit of some of the advocacy that has taken place here at JerseyCAN and statewide, what that has yielded, where we are in terms of what does the data look like right now today, and what are we hoping for in the future, and how do we plan to get there? So sort of let's lay the groundwork of where we are. Let's think about what the work is being done on the ground to make an impact, and what we hope to see in the future. So if we can go to the next slide, and then to the next, we're going to just sort of think about what is the state of literacy in New Jersey. And so I want to just go back a couple of years to talk about what that looked like. So 51% of our students were below proficient in reading on the NJSLA. Almost 70% of disadvantaged students across New Jersey were not proficient in reading at that point. And then I'm sharing some statistics that you likely know, which is that 70% of incarcerated people have scored basic or below basic on literacy tests. So we know that there is, if you don't want to say causation, there's certainly significant correlation between literacy and, sort of life chances. And, as that shows up with incarceration, for example, as well as youth who are disengaged. And we know that when youth are disengaged, that spells trouble for the future. So I just wanted to kind of share a few data points there. And I want to go to another slide now to share some other more recent data points and talk about that for a moment if we can. So as it stands now, 56% of the New Jersey's third graders are not meeting reading standards. So we've got a 44% statewide reading proficiency rate for our third graders. And what we have, always said is that you are learning to read K3, and then starting in fourth grade, you're essentially reading to learn, which means that obviously you're focused more on the content, and less on the mechanics of reading. So really the third grade reading scores are really a bellwether of a student's ability to be able to access the higher level content material and really be able to keep up with schoolwork. And so this is why this is a number that we really track closely. But now if we will take our gaze for a moment from our local New Jersey data points, then we can go to what's called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, otherwise known as NAEP, and sort of affectionately referred to as the nation's report card. And that is because it facilitates apples to apples comparisons across state lines in our country. It is the only assessment that does this. And this is significant because you can have less rigorous or different kinds of tests at one grade level in one state versus another state. And so when you see the numbers of one state level to another based on state tests, you don't always really fully understand what that looks like. And I can give you a quick example. So if you have a test that focuses on just lower level recall questions, right? So you could have, Susie and Johnny went to the store, and then, something happened in the story that you read, and one of the questions or most of the questions may focus on recall. Where did Susie and Johnny go? Well, to the store or something like that, right? Whereas if one of the details in the story had to do with Susie grabbed her umbrella before, she walked out the door, then a higher level question may say, what was the weather most likely like on that day, where students have to make an inference that if she grabbed the umbrella, and so on. So you can see that depending on the reading test, you're not always getting the same information state over state, but the NAEP is administered to every single, state in the exact same way. And so we can extrapolate more from this data. Well, what we know is that 38% of New Jersey's fourth graders are reading proficient on NAEP, and those scores just got published this year. And that same number is repeated for our eighth graders. Now, I will say this, NAEP is more rigorous than the average, than most tests, and intentionally so. So, 38% on NAEP would probably translate loosely to maybe 45 or even maybe 50% possibly on, let's say, the New Jersey state test. So I do want to sort of, be honest about that. Nonetheless, the National Center for Education Statistics, they have created this test with the level of rigor that they feel, the day demands in terms of what it will bode for our students being able, to sort of take the reins of the roles and the positions that we will need to move our country forward, and, the kinds of literacy skills that we'll need. And so at this time, there is a ACNJ is a national organization that looks at basic learning principles of reading and what they consider to be best practices in terms of a state's infrastructure for reading. And they have 17 of these principles like, does the state have high quality curriculum? Does the state use universal screeners with students? Do they, do they stay away from strategies that are not effective, like, encouraging students to guess a word or to use a picture clue to decide what a word is, things that are not really supported by what good reading pretends. And so of those 17, New Jersey has, in their estimation, adopted only 4. I will say, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, that as time has progressed and based on some of the advances that we've made in the state recently, we're up to about a 7 or 8 on this, certainly either fully adopted or in progress. But nevertheless, this really just lets us know that we have work to do. And as I state here on this slide, New Jersey has fluctuated in minuscule or small ways year over year, but we have not sustained improvement overall or closed socioeconomic or racial gaps in fourth grade reading proficiency. And I will give you an example. If we look at this NAEP fourth grade reading score, 4 of the poorest states in the nation have their fourth graders reading at a higher proficiency rate than for their socioeconomically disadvantaged population. Their socioeconomically disadvantaged fourth graders are reading at a higher level than New Jersey's fourth graders who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so we know that New Jersey is one of the wealthiest states in the nation, but we have 4 of the lowest 10 states in terms of poverty in the nation, specifically Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, and South Carolina. very, very poor states, but they have a higher level of their socioeconomically disadvantaged fourth graders reading proficiently than we do. So that just really lets us know that we've got work to do in this regard. We can go to the next slide. And so we really had established a, just some foci for a literacy campaign in our state. What can we do to change this? So really, first of all, having daylight as a call to action. So create a multimedia campaign to let folks know that this is a problem, because we are a wealthy state, and depending, some demographics do quite well. And so it might be easy to kind of lull ourselves into this, sense of complacency, but it's really important to highlight the data and also to elevate grassroots voices, to build a coalition of supportive organizations that are really taking up this mantle and saying, whoa, let's lock arms. We may not have the same mission. We may be a different kind of organization, but this is a big deal. So let's come together on this. And so mobilizing efforts, identifying legislative partners for bill creation and promotion, and finally embedding the literacy conversation at every political and policy layer. And so that's been, sort of a four-pronged foci of a literacy campaign in the state of New Jersey. So we can go to the next slide. And so as a result of those foci, the New Jersey Legacy of Literacy Coalition was formed and serves as an umbrella alliance in support of the statewide campaign to work with the governor, the state legislature, and the New Jersey Department of Education to adopt and enact a high-quality statewide plan to substantively advance literacy outcomes in New Jersey, and really thinking about adopting science of reading principles in a comprehensive way. So not just phonemic awareness and phonics. We don't want to just shove worksheets in kids' faces and have them say cat and bat all day, but thinking about fluency, thinking about building vocabulary, thinking about expanding and really paying attention to reading comprehension, building background knowledge and things like that. So really having a comprehensive plan. And so in the next slide, I want to be able to share with you just an example of some of the folks in the Literacy Coalition. It is a cross-sector coalition. So we've got folks like Camden Education Fund, Decoding Dyslexia, the New Jersey chapter, the Essex County Council for Young Children, the Newark Opportunity Youth Network, specifically My Brother's Keeper. And I won't, sort of read everything here, but we've got parent organizations like Unapologetic Parents. We've got the Racial Equity Initiative. We've got West Side Citizens United, which is out of Asbury Park, and the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. So just calling out a few of the folks that are a part of this coalition, really focused on being evangelists and ambassadors for advancing literacy in the state of New Jersey. And so here are the 5 areas of consideration in building out an optimal state level reading infrastructure. And so we wanted to think about 5 big areas. First and foremost, science of reading, or what we refer to more frequently in New Jersey as foundational literacy instruction, having that training for classroom practitioners. We have educators that have been in the classroom for a long time. They may have been trained in different ways. And so we want to level the playing field, and we don't want to hold educators accountable for methods in which they have not been trained and or supported. And our educators work very, very hard. And so we want to make sure it's not just hard work, but the right work. So really starting off by training classroom practitioners. But then we also want to go upstream, because in a district like Newark, for example, where they're hiring hundreds of teachers every year, we want to make sure that those educators are leaving their educator preparation programs ready for prime time on day 1 in the classroom. So we want to also impact the teacher preparation programs, so that way teachers are not coming out ill-prepared, maybe being trained in methods that are not supported by evidence, and then now they're sort of having to unlearn or relearn. So we want to really impact the pre-service teacher landscape. And then having a universal screener to identify students' entry point along the continuum of reading, making sure that there are a couple of times a year at least where a student, we get a sense of where they are. And so educators can plan about sort of what are the gaps to fill, are they behind, are they ahead, what are the things that they need to understand so that they can teach effectively. And so, for example, a screener might be, a teacher may sit side by side with a kid and ask them to point out the pictures that show, words that rhyme. And a student may point to a bat and a ball instead of bat and cat. And so that lets the educator know, a student thinks that rhyming words have the same beginning sound, bat and ball, when of course we know in fact that they have, the same ending sound, bat and cat. And so those kinds of things to just get an early read of where students are, really important. We also wanted, number 4, notification to parents of students identified with reading deficiencies, making sure that that was a part of any legislation that's passed. So parents would be kept in the loop, because a lot of times there is what is sometimes referred to as an honesty gap, which may be manifesting in students getting A's on their report card, or A's and B's, let's say, or even a C. And so the assumption is that they are mastering their grade level material, when in fact they may not be reading at grade level, but they may be doing well on the work that's placed in front of them, right? And so we want to make sure that there's a sort of objective standard of where students fall, and that parents are kept in the loop so that they're not blindsided, when it's too late, or, when the student is applying for a program or whatever it is, or when they get test scores back. We want parents to be kept in the loop so that they can be supportive and they have a right to know. And then 5, a district adoption of high quality instructional materials. We don't want to sort of try to fit a square peg in a round hole, if you will. So we don't want to get teachers really well trained on appropriate ways to teach, the best ways to teach reading that's most supported by the evidence, to get most, the largest swath of students reading at grade level. We don't want to have them have that training, and then when they come to the classroom, the curriculum materials that they have are a mismatch, because then we will have teachers scrambling on Sunday night online and pulling worksheets and printing things and doing a lot of this extra work that is really not fair to them if they have the proper curriculum materials in place in their schools. And so we really want to, focus on that. So those are the 5 areas of consideration in building out this optimal state level reading infrastructure. So the next couple of slides just kind of talk about, laying the groundwork for this work here in the state. So, op-eds and things that we've written about, like, where are our children's test scores? We want to make sure we see the scores so we know how they're doing. Hosting a statewide education forum to talk about these things. And if we can go to the next slide, also thinking about, we screened a film called The Right to Read, which really examined reading deficits in children and how they can be, changed or followed to families. And it was really quite compelling. And then the next thing that we did, if we can go to the next slide, is to publish a report called Leveraging Literacy, the Path to Education Recovery in New Jersey. And in that report, essentially what we did was we talked about those 5 areas that I just mentioned about 2 or 3 slides back, and really, provided a case study, city or town, to illustrate why each of those areas of focus matter. And so we got that report in the hands of, everyone from the governor to our state board of education members and so on, to really sort of fight that fight. And the next slide, we can just sort of gloss over that. That just really talks about, some of those articles that came out. We were sort of pushing for that. The slide after that, just now we want to start talking about where the campaign of so many folks from our Principals and Supervisors Association in New Jersey School Boards Association, the New Jersey Education Association, as well as some of those associations that you saw on that slide about the New Jersey Literacy Coalition, Legacy of Literacy Coalition. And now we start to see momentum. So we were able to see where the state board in 2023 adopted into statute an early literacy specialist position, which would ensure that that there would be an opportunity for educators to benefit from someone at the building level who is well-versed in foundational literacy. And then the New Jersey State Board of Education adopts revised standards in English language arts, which are aligned to the science of reading. And then State Senator Teresa Ruiz introduced a comprehensive early literacy legislation, again, aligned to foundational literacy principles, sometimes called the science of reading. And so we'll go a little bit further in that timeline on the next slide, where you will see that by the time we get to 2024, Governor Murphy delivers a State of the State address where, after, sort of having this conversation in earnest, our governor said, hey, we have got to do something, and we're going to do something. And he strongly, advocated for foundational literacy principles. And this is what he said verbatim: it is simple. An emphasis on phonics and reading instruction is essential to the lifelong success of our children. So with the endorsement of our governor, and picking up the momentum of all the organizations that had been really pushing for this, bills were favorably voted on in the New Jersey Senate in July. And August of 2024, Governor Murphy signed literacy and academic recovery bills aligned with our report into law. And so we can go to the next slide. In these slides now, I want to transition to talk about what these changes that are passed into law, what they mean, where are we going with them. So when I say standards were, new standards were passed that were effective at the state board level, what does that mean? Well, the standards set expectations for what students should learn, whereas curriculum tells how students will learn the content set out in the standards. So it's important to note that in the state of New Jersey, curriculum is a local decision, but the state standards are set by our New Jersey State Board of Education. And so these revised state standards emphasize foundational reading skills to help children become competent readers and writers. And so focuses on decoding, which would be to, sort of pull the words apart to say them, and encoding, which engages students in writing and spelling words, analyzing word parts for meanings, whether it's prefixes, suffixes, roots of words, and so on, becoming fluent readers, reading with comprehension, and having effective writing skills. So our standards have been beefed up in these specific ways. And these are the standards that this year, this academic year that is ongoing, was the first year that these standards were put in place. If we can go to the next slide, I want to then just kind of talk about what the first of two bills that were passed, what they entail. So the first bill, S 2644, created a student literacy working group. And so they are producing a report, which should be coming out any day now, over the next literally days, that will chronicle some of the best literacy practices in the state and the country, and recommend regulations and policies for the state of New Jersey. And then this report will then inform the guidance that the New Jersey Department of Education develops and disseminates for school districts. And so this is going to be really important, because it's going to put sort of meat on the bones of, what the law says. And so the law mandates now, as of the fall of 2025, so going into the 2025-2026 school year, universal literacy screeners for K-3 students at least 2 times a year. And it is also the case for grades 4 through 6, if a student is new to a school, that they must have a literacy screener. So they can't just come into the 5th grade and we say, okay, go in the 5th grade classroom and, good luck, right? We want to make sure that we have a good sense of where that student is so that their needs can be met. Also, this law, as I said, as per our hope, it requires parent notification of student screener results within 30 days of the screening window. So if the screening window is September 5th to October 5th, when the students first start school, within 30 days of the close of that screening window, parents must be notified of where their students lie. And then this bill also mandates and provides free professional development to all teachers, media specialists, and administrators to learn about topics including phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. And for the older grades of 4 to 6, those teachers learn about the neurobiology of reading and advanced word study. So 2 things to note here. One is that this professional development goes K through 6, and also that it's not just classroom teachers, it's also media specialists, which, we used to call librarians, as well as school administrators, so that school administrators are trained and poised to support classroom instruction when they do their observations or when they do sort of provide informal or formal feedback to educators, that they will have an informed lens from which to do so. And so if we look at the other bill that was passed, this was about establishing an Office of Learning Equity and Academic Recovery at the New Jersey Department of Education. And so why did Senator Ruiz do this, and what does it mandate? Well, it mandates the promotion of student literacy and the advancement of learning equity, making sure that there are equitable opportunities for students, regardless of their demographic markers, to be able to have access to high quality teaching and learning as it relates to literacy and really academic recovery, which remains an ongoing concern post-COVID, particularly for students in the lowest quartiles and who have been historically disadvantaged. Many students in the higher quartiles have caught up, but that is not the case at all for our students in the lowest quartiles. And so really improving the New Jersey Department of Education's capacity to make data-driven decisions regarding literacy and learning equity policies. And so this office is also tasked with conducting research on best practices in literacy and supporting school districts in developing and implementing best practices, like the use of high-quality instructional materials, which I talked about earlier, and really mining the state to look at where educators are already doing foundationally aligned work in reading, and they're seeing results, so that, if this is happening in a small town in South Jersey, and I wouldn't know that being in Bloomfield, for example, that there is a mechanism whereby the state is being intentional about elevating where things are working so that folks can sort of expand their learning community and learn from practitioners right here in our state. And if we go to the next slide, I also want to talk about our regulations for kindergarten through grade 6 and preschool to grade 3 certification that will be in effect as of September 1st of this year. Remember, I said that we wanted to impact the pre-service educator landscape. And so the New Jersey Administrative Code will mandate teacher candidates to earn 9 to 12 credits of content knowledge on reading and literacy, including knowledge of phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, reading comprehension, fluency, and concepts of print. And so whereas before and right now, prospective teacher candidates can take one course, 3 credits would have sufficed for reading, which we all know, certainly if you're old enough, you remember the catchphrase of reading is fundamental. And we know that is one of the most important things that a student will learn and that a teacher will have to do. And so this really beefs up that requirement. So we're looking at 3 to 4 college classes that must focus on this area. And that those teacher candidates must acquire strategies for teaching reading comprehension and, the full swath of what it means to be literate, not just comprehending reading, but writing and speaking and listening. And also taking coursework focused on teacher knowledge to integrate literacy skills in science and social studies. So, in the best case scenario, as a former educator, I always say that every teacher ideally is a reading teacher. And so that doesn't mean that every teacher, will teach kindergarten and at that level, but certainly in science and social studies, being able to draw attention to specific words, that students can understand that bio means life. So anytime they see, that word part anywhere, they can, extrapolate from that likely is related to life, things like that are going to show up in science, things that are going to show up in social studies, making those connections and reinforcing that level of knowledge for our students. And so that's what's coming down the pike. And so I'd like to just sort of wrap up this portion of our time together by talking about what the windows of opportunity are for implementing those literacy solutions that I alluded to. So I think the first piece is really to focus on learning acceleration and not incrementalism. And what do I mean by that? We have seen, so the last cycle of our New Jersey state tests, we had 42% of students reading at grade level. And then, so that means 58% weren't reading at grade level. And then this most recent administration, we have 44% reading at grade level. So there's a 2% difference there. But what we've learned is that if we have differences, either up or down, that are within what we call the confidence interval, so not really a great difference, those differences are, very fragile and they don't typically hold. So, we might go up to 44% this year, but if we're just inching up by 2%, chances are, there's a good chance we might go back to 42% next year. So what we want to do is think about, can we really educate students in an intensive and supportive enough fashion such that we can see a 4% or a 5% or 6 or even 7% increase from one year to the next. And that way, even if we have a little bit of a dip, we are still in a net positive scenario, and that we are building on our students' knowledge bases. So that way, those gains will hold. So we really want to focus on learning acceleration, not incrementalism. And then the second part here is connecting the dots between content knowledge and literacy success, particularly beyond third grade. And let me give you an example of what I mean. There was a study that was done where they looked at some fifth graders and had them look at read a reading passage and answer some questions. And one of the students was a student who was considered a great reader. The other student was considered an average reader, but had content knowledge of the passage that was being read. So the student that was an average reader actually played baseball and had been playing baseball for a while. And this passage focused on baseball. And who do you think did better on the reading passage? Was it the good reader, or was it the reader who was adept at playing baseball? If you selected the latter, you would be correct. And so what that tells us is that understanding the mechanics of reading is very important. That will never not be important. What is also important is having content knowledge, building content knowledge, and understanding sort of broad swaths of what's happening in science, what's happening in social studies, what's happening in other broad topics in the world, because the more exposed students are to various topics and ideas, the more they will be able to make those connections. I always say And I know someone here has experienced this, where you meet someone at an event. Maybe we're meeting each other here even, and maybe I will, maybe next week or the week after that, I will see Echo in a store, and I will say, oh my goodness, never met Echo before, and now I just saw Echo. Isn't that neat? Well, the reality is that I could have very well seen Echo time and time again in the past, but I had nothing in my database to connect it to. But since I have explicitly met Echo now, if I were to see Echo again, I would absolutely make that connection and would pull it up in my database. And so that's the notion of connecting the dots between content knowledge and literacy success. And the third piece is really partnering with parents meaningfully around literacy. Cannot stress this enough. This is not just about, it's about educating parents to the extent that we can and engaging parents, and not expecting parents to be teachers, not expecting them to, necessarily, lots of our parents, they're not English speakers, native English speakers. They may have grueling schedules and things of that nature, but there are little things that we can do in order to be supportive. We can talk about, what it looks like to, to set aside 20 minutes for reading at home, where every single, device is turned off and everybody reads. We can talk about, we can share with them some of the websites that students, when they say, Mom, can I borrow your phone, or Dad or Aunt or Grandma? Okay, sure, you can borrow my phone. Get on this site. You want to play a game, play this game, because we know that these 3 or 4 sites have been vetted for really reinforcing some good knowledge around foundational literacy. So really partnering with parents in a meaningful way that is not unduly demanding of them and presupposing skills that they don't have, but really empowers them to be able to support their students in ways that we already know that they want to, and they just need to be clear about, ways that they can do that. And then the fourth piece, which is really important given the moment that we're in March, there will be a changing of the guard in the governor's office in the fall, and which may or may not result in a transition at other levels related to education. We want to make sure that we're holding leaders accountable for literacy across leadership transitions at all levels. Right? So it's, literacy is not a flavor of the month pursuit. It's really holding on to foundational principles, to the principles that have the best evidence about being able to change the trajectory of students' reading achievement and thus their lives, and really saying, let's make sure that whatever else we do, that we are staying the course in this regard. And let's make sure that whether we're incentivizing districts with grants that we give them or anything else, that it is really focused on staying the course. And so I will stop there, and I'm going to have some water, and I am going to also be certainly open to taking questions, and perhaps I can catch up and have a look at the chat as well.